Microsoft has announced it is building multiple next-generation devices, and the head of PlayStation says the future of the platform is top of mind. We'll dig into all that on Next Gen Console Watch coming up after these messages. Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the latest gaming hardware. I'm Damon Hatfield, and this week I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of Unlocked, and Max Scoville, host of Beyond.
Hey.
And we've got some next-gen Xbox news today. Now, some of this sounds a little familiar to me. I want Ryan to sort of refresh my memory, but here's what's in the headlines today. Microsoft has said in a statement announcing that we're building the next generation of Xbox first-party devices and cloud, including our future Xbox consoles, together with AMD. They promise next-level performance, cutting-edge graphics, breakthrough gameplay, and unmatched compatibility. It also said everything it's working on will be fully compatible with users' existing Xbox game library. So that's great. That all sounds cool. But Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong. Did they not already announce they were working on next-gen Xbox hardware?
They have. To me, this was more of a we're sticking with AMD announcement as opposed to going in some different direction. Yeah, I mean, I think you more or less you could have copy-pasted this same announcement from before the Series X came out, and it would have been pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's announcing the ongoing partnership with AMD, which is going to make compatibility a lot easier for Xbox, who obviously has, to their credit, really dragged the entire industry, the entire console industry, forward on the idea of compatibility. So yeah, we can look forward to everything working on the next Xbox in whatever forms, plural, the next Xboxes take.
Well, earlier this year, there was a report that Microsoft is targeting 2027 release window for both its next-gen Xbox and also its first-party handheld, and that it would be more like a PC than any console before it that would support third-party storefronts like Steam, Epic Game Store, Good Old Games, as well as Xbox. How are you feeling about all that, and especially the first-party handheld? Because there are also reports that that's sort of been sidelined in favor of the third-party handheld.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought both of those up because I had the same reaction of, wait a second, I thought the report we got was that they'd more or less backburnered the first-party handheld, but they were pretty clear. They said next generation. Sarah Bond in the announcement video says, next generation Xbox consoles in your living room and in your hands. Now, technically, there's nothing explicitly stated there that says it wouldn't necessarily be a third-party handheld, but I certainly took it to mean, hey, we're working with AMD to co-develop the silicon for these next generation Xbox devices, including a handheld. So it seems to me like the handheld device, if it was ever off the table, it's back on. And then, you brought up the issue of the timing. And I kind of had the same reaction of like, well, making this announcement now, even if it's basically just a dressed up AMD partnership announcement, are they really 3.5 years away if they're making this announcement now about the next generation of Xbox hardware? It would seem like things are a little bit closer than that, which could very well align with 2.5 years from now, aka fall of 2027. So yeah, I've pretty well landed where you have with this, Daemon, is it seems like it's sort of reaffirming a lot of what we already knew, but just making it clear that they're intending to build multiple devices. Now, the storefronts thing, that's the last piece I wanted to mention, is because that one, her quote here specifically, I had to write it down to make sure that I had it exactly right. It says, not locked to a single store or tied to one device. And then they want to ensure that Windows is the number one platform for gaming. Right. So my takeaway from that is that they just got done telling us about the ROG Ally X, the third-party handheld that's going to use kind of a simplified version of Windows, a more just Xbox streamlined, less fat version of Windows to free up more resources and have the thing sort of just operate more like a console than as a handheld running Windows on it. And I would suspect that is what the next generation of Xbox machines consoles is going to do too, is probably run on that same software architecture. And yeah, I interpreted that as sign into your Steam account, play your Steam games, sign into your Epic Game Store account, play your EGS games. That was my takeaway. I certainly could be wrong, but I feel like they were, the wording of that video that Sarah put out and the Xbox team put out, they went over every word of that 1,000 times. So everything they said, they were very careful and deliberate about. And that's my takeaway, is that, yes, we're going to be able to, this is going to be like an all-in-one PC/console hybrid where you can sign in to Steam with it.
And I don't think you were able to go hands-on with ROG Xbox Ally X, correct? I don't. We haven't talked about that on this show. Could you sort of briefly share your first impressions?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have much to say because all I got to do was play Gears of War Reloaded on it for 3 minutes. Just a quick little how it feels in the hand, how the game performed. I didn't get to see any of that underlying OS layer or any software side system functionality. So all I can really say is as far as the device itself, when I watched the Xbox showcase at IGN Live a couple weeks ago, the device looked like a brick. Just when you see Phil Spencer with it, I was like, man, that thing looks pretty big. And I was worried it was going to be kind of a very dense, heavy brick. It's not. It was a lot lighter than I expected it to be. It was definitely comfortable by having, the handles of an Xbox controller on either side of it. So ergonomically, it felt pretty good, and it was lighter than I expected. And then on the performance side, unfortunately, with no disrespect to the Coalition, Gears of War Reloaded's not really the best thing to try and get a real sense of its horsepower with, because it's a 19-year-old game. It's being very lovingly remastered. Like, it does look really good, but it's still, it's running an old game. So, and once we can throw Cyberpunk at it, or we can throw, something newer and more demanding at it, than the Gears of War 1 from 2006 now being remastered for a second time, that's when I think we'll get a better sense of it. But overall, very, very brief impression. It's a positive one.
All right. So Xbox confirms or reaffirms it's continuing to develop next-gen hardware, which is interesting as it becomes more and more like a publisher, a cross-platform publisher all the time that is happy to put its games anywhere. But what of PlayStation? I think Max, correct me if I'm off the mark here, but I think the general consensus is PS5 has been very, very successful, but I think people are a little disappointed with PlayStation's first-party output this generation. But we do have some quotes from the head of PlayStation looking to the future. This is from a recent fireside chat. Sony Interactive Entertainment CEO and President Hideaki Nishino said, "We now have a large ecosystem of highly engaged players across both the PlayStation 5 and the PS4 generations. So naturally, therefore, there's a huge interest in our next generation console strategy. While we cannot share further details at this stage, the future of the platform is top of mind. We are committed to exploring a new and enhanced way for players to engage with our content and services." How would you decode that, Max? Is that anything different than just a PlayStation 6 that's a more powerful PS5?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think the big thing that they're harping on there is that they have a lot of players. Mm-hmm. It's the number one console right now, and that's the thing that Xbox wants, and they're putting Xbox wherever you can get it, and Sony's got their little walled garden, and there's a lot of people in there. And I think that it's interesting they mentioned PlayStation 4 because that is at this point that's had its seat taken for 5 years. The PS5 has been doing its thing. We've gotten our fair share of new games on PlayStation 5 that are not on PS4, but there's still a whole lot of people who are still on PlayStation 4, and I imagine that's the tricky thing for Sony to figure out right now is how do you take care of those people without holding everyone else back, without obviously we want to get big, huge, exciting next gen games that make you want to run out and buy a PlayStation 6, but how do you make those without just completely abandoning this,
Mm-hmm.
existing ecosystem you've got in place there? So that's promising. The big takeaway here that I really liked is that they acknowledge that people like to play locally. They like to play on consoles. I know there was some concern about the push into cloud gaming. That's a thing that is continuing to exist, and it's become more widespread. But Nishino basically, continued on this path, kind of pointing out that, yeah, cloud gaming is cool. The line here is end-to-end network stability is not in our control, which is basically they might have the tech, but the infrastructure isn't there to back it up. And until that happens, it's nice to hear that they're not entirely banking on that. I know that while we're talking about everyone making handhelds except Sony, the PlayStation Portal, not quite a handheld, sort of a cloud gaming device, but again, it's ultimately something that you can do with your phone. It's a cool little device. The way I've always, the thing that made it click for me is that it's not really a handheld as much as it is a long range controller. And it's, I think looking at that, it's easy to be like, well, is Sony going to push things entirely in that direction? Are we going to see a cloud-based console? And from the sound of it, no, which is reassuring. I know that we've all talked on this show about the possibility of an entirely cloud-based streaming future. And I don't think it's there yet. So that's nice to hear. They acknowledge that we like consoles, and I think we do. So cool.
We do like consoles here. Yeah. The further quote from Nishino was, "Cloud gaming is increasingly providing an additional option for players to access content, but our belief is that the majority of players continue to want to experience gaming through local execution without dependency on network conditions." Now, Ryan, in Microsoft's announcement today, they mentioned cloud very, very clearly and right up front: next generation first party devices and cloud. So what's your sort of thoughts on how important cloud gaming is to Xbox?
I mean, I think it's certainly not at the top of the list as far as their priority goes, but they've leaned very hard into this. We want you to play Xbox anywhere you play games, and if that happens to be through a phone via the cloud, so be it. They want to support that. But yeah, I mean, it's still clear that Xbox's strategy is console, PC, and pretty soon handheld. Like those are going to be the three sort of legs of the stool, and cloud will be there. It's part of your game. It's a Game Pass incentive. Like, hey, if you're on Game Pass Ultimate, you can stream a whole bunch of stuff right to your phone if you want as well. And if you carry around an Xbox controller, you can even play it with an Xbox controller. But yeah, I guess it's a little higher up the priority list than it is at Sony, but it's not to say that either one of them is banking on cloud gaming being a significant driver of customers, of installed base, of really anything other than, I think they're both just trying to future proof for something that I think we all see as somewhat inevitable, and that's everything eventually just streamed through the cloud once the infrastructure is capable of supporting that.
I think that's exactly it. And it's not going to improve unless they keep throwing money at it. And that's what they're doing. It's nice to see that they're not entirely resorting to that. It was kind of a drag to see Stadia come out swinging and then immediately, go face down. I don't know. It's not a future I'm particularly excited about, but at the same time, like there was that weird paradigm shift when Netflix went from a browser thing you'd go to click what DVDs you'd want in the mail to a browser window that would just let you watch entire movies. So at some point it'll work. I don't know when that's going to be, but it's good to know that the big two are there and getting in front of it.
I think Stadia could have stood a chance if it had been a subscription service, but instead you had to buy each game that you were going to stream. It was insane. So Ryan, as someone who's covered Xbox for a long time and someone who's a fan of Xbox, how are you feeling about this? Are you excited? Or is it
good? I mean, it's like the reality is Xbox is never going to be number one. It's just not there. That ship sailed a while ago. So they're leaning into this put Xbox everywhere strategy. And really that comes down to the games. And that's something that if Next Gen Console Watch had existed, this show had existed during the Xbox One PS4 generation, I would have just been grumpy all the time, just constantly whining and complaining, but justifiably so, about how Microsoft was horrifically mismanaging their first-party studios and their portfolio. But they have finally started to deliver. I mean, they started buying swaths of game studios in 2017 or 2018, one of those two. It's been a minute now that they've really started the first-party acquisition, and obviously that really capped off with the Activision Blizzard thing for $69 billion. But we're at the point now where if you look, I mean, we're sitting here in June, you can go back, not even 6, you can go back 7 months or so, and it's Flight Simulator, which is great. It's Stalker 2, which they did a great job on. It's Indiana Jones, which was my personal vote for Game of the Year last year.
Great game.
Avowed this year.
Love Avowed.
And they published Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, so I mean that gets to count in their bucket, even though it's on PS5. Doom is tremendous. South of Midnight reviewed really well. So, and maybe I'm even leaving one out, but like they've been consistently putting out not just first-party games, but very good first-party games, and in a few cases they're even tremendous ones. I mean, there are a few, like I said, my Game of the Year was in that mix. So, and then the rest of this year, you're looking at The Outer Worlds 2 and Keeper, and Grounded 2 as just an early access initial release. So it's like the software is the key, and they're finally starting to deliver on that. So if they can consistently keep that going, then sure, I don't think they're going to be too mad about if people don't buy their console, but if they pay $70 or even $80 for their games on PlayStation 5, that they're going to get a significant cut of. So, it's a different future than we might have imagined at the start of the Xbox One and PS4 generation. But ultimately, yeah, that's all I want. And I think all any of us want are just great games. And they are truly finally starting to deliver that.
On any article like this, it's about the next gen of gaming hardware. You'll see comments from, wherever platform they prefer to play. There's always comments expressing disappointment in this generation. Like, this generation hasn't been fully realized. The whole industry wanted to keep one foot in last gen. We still see big games being released for PS4 and Xbox One. We were saying earlier, like, Sony hasn't really had as much of an impressive lineup this generation as they had in the PS4 generation. So just curious, Max, what are your thoughts? The current generation, the PS5, Xbox Series X generation, thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs mid.
Thumbs mid.
Yeah.
I think like I'm not a huge proponent of platform exclusives either way, but I will say that the PS4 generation, Sony was behind some really cool ones, and I feel like the big culprit here was banking heavily on live service, and we've watched multiple projects either get canceled or have studios closed or land with a thud. And it almost feels like the PS5 generation is going to be seen as sort of a wash, where the long development times and heavily backing the wrong horse, or at least not sticking with it. At this point, why wouldn't they just look ahead to PlayStation 6 games? Like we're inevitably going to get some cool ones at the tail end of the PS5 life cycle, but it doesn't really feel like we're getting much in the near future anytime soon. And yeah, we did a thing at IGN Live about the kind of celebrating the PS4, and while prepping for that, it was kind of hurt to look back at how many awesome games were coming out at a steady cadence. And primarily talking about PS4 exclusives, but even just big annualized franchises. We griped about that back then, but now it's like, I don't know, when's the next Far Cry coming out? Things take too long to make these days, and it's kind of a bummer, and I think that's going to be how this generation is looked upon. Yeah.
Speaking of the live service games, Bungie's Marathon, I think, was just delayed kind of indefinitely today. But I am very, very excited for Ghosts of Yote Tsushima, probably my favorite PS4 game. Okay, dear viewers and listeners, we want to know, what do you want most out of a next-gen Xbox? Unrivaled horsepower, a physical disc drive, a new controller, or a relatively low price? Maybe wishful thinking there. Make sure to vote at IGN.com the day this episode goes live. We'll share the results with you next episode, just like we can with last week's poll. What is your favorite handheld of all time? And the winner with 34% of the vote was the Nintendo Switch, which that makes sense. That tracks. I was a little bit surprised that the 3DS just barely beat the DS by about 2 percentage points, considering the DS sold more than double what the 3DS sold. I don't. Do you think, Ryan, that's just maybe a little bit more recency bias? People last played their 3DS more recently.
Yeah, you're probably right. I confess I voted in that poll this morning before we recorded. I just happened upon it on the website, and I voted for the GBA SP because I do have a lot of fun memories of that. Nothing against the Switch, but I was actually, the reason I mentioned that is because it shows you the results when you vote. And the GBA-SP actually represented reasonably well in that poll.
That's number 2. Yeah.
I like that you specified the SP because if it was the launch model, yeah. I'm a big proponent of the Game Boy Micro, which is the little one that came squeaking along at the end. That thing is adorable.
The final Game Boy. Okay, that's gonna do it. That's our show for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for Ryan and Max. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes to get the gremlins out of the system so we can record our show this week, make this episode possible. My name is Daemon. I'm actually gonna be on vacation for the next few weeks, so I leave you in the hands of both Ryan and Max. Very, very capable hands. They will be your hosts for the next 3 weeks. So please be excited for that. My name is Daemon. We'll be back next week with more next generation gaming news. We'll see you then. This episode of Next Gen Console Watch was produced by myself, Damon Hadfield, and Jobert Atienza. Technical direction is by Jobert Atienza, with technical production by Marian Franzen and Amir Rakib. Audio engineering is handled by Amir Rakib. Post-production editing is by Jobert Atienza, and graphic design is by Justin Vachon. Next Gen Console Watch is an IGN production and part of the Geek Media Network.